Greetings, YouTube. The Doctor is in. Dr. Urias Papers here, coming at you with another commentary on Dungeons and Dragons. And, well, we are sort of commenting about Dungeons and Dragons, but we are commenting about the leadership of Dungeons and Dragons. And as you can see from the title of this article that I found today in N-World, Jeremy Crawford is also leaving the Dungeons and Dragons team later this month, in addition to Chris Perkins. Is that a coincidence with the folding of the digital tabletop? I don't know. Maybe. Could be. And we're going to talk about the reasoning behind that, some of the articles that we've gotten, some of the news we've gotten. But we're also going to talk about some of the names of people that are mentioned in these articles. But first, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you have any questions or comments, please leave a question or a comment. And don't forget to hit that notification bell. So if you Google Jeremy Crawford and N-World, this will be the first article that comes up. And it is a summary of an interview that was done with Jess Lanzillo. I think I'm pronouncing that, or Lanzillo. Who is the vice president of basically Dungeons & Dragons. She took over for Kyle Brink. So it says here, Jeremy Crawford is leaving Wizards of the Coast later this month. Screen Rant had the exclusive announcement. So if we click on that, it goes here to the Screen Rant article. Here is the Screen Rant article, and here is a very famous picture of both Jeremy Crawford, and so there's Jeremy right there, and Chris Perkins, he's right there. Sitting, talking about the 2024 Player's Handbook. So let's go through this article really quick. So it says the guiding forces of Dungeons & Dragons last month, for the last decade, are both departing Wizards of the Coast. Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford have been part of the Dungeons & Dragons design team for decades and were two of the lead designers of the game's current 5th edition rule set. They were not the lead designer. That was Mike Merles. So let's set the record straight on that one. That was Mike Merles, who was let go last year as well. Now, whether he was let go or whether he chose to leave or was offered to leave, that is up for debate. But Mike Merles is now over at Chaosium. So the article continues. Recently, Perkins became the creative director for Dungeons & Dragons, overseeing the story direction of the setting for both the game and other media, while Crawford became the game director, overseeing the rules of the game. So, there is someone above them. One of them is in charge of, like, campaign settings and stories and things like that. That was Chris Perkins. And one of them was in charge of the rules and overseeing, like, the rules that went into the 2024 rules. So let's keep going on here. It says, after leading the design team of a new revised 5th edition and the new core rule books, both Perkins and Crawford are stepping away from Wizards of the Coast. Not Dungeons & Dragons, but Wizards of the Coast. Perkins announced his departure last week, and Screen Rant has learned that Crawford's last day will come this month. So one of them is gone, and that was Chris Perkins. That was last week, and the second one, Jeremy Crawford, is later this month, in the month of April. Their departure marks a massive shift for Dungeons & Dragons, as the two were the primary shepherds of the game for over a decade. So my question is, are they quitting, or were they asked to leave, or did they just see the writing on the wall and decided to take off? Because things haven't been great. Let's just be honest. Things have not been great for Dungeons & Dragons at all since the 2024 announcement. Even the 2024 announcement, things haven't been great. We had the announcement. We had the OGL crisis. We had the Pinkertons show up to people's houses. That was a Magic the Gathering thing with Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. We've had one thing after the other, and then we've had very lackluster sales in the 2024 edition. So, speaking to Screen Rant about, let's get down to this here. Speaking to Screen Rant about the pair's departure from the company, Wizards of the Coast's VP of Franchise and Product Dungeons & Dragons, Jess Lanzillo, said that this was something that the company had prepared for. Both of them had, this is what she said, both of them had been working on Dungeons & Dragons for a very long time. It's been a point of discussion for some time and something that we've been training up everyone for. They feel really good about the teams that they have in place and the legacy that they are passing on. So Jess Lanzio took over for Kyle Brink, and let's go here. She took over for Kyle Brink last year. So we've got a couple of articles up on the Hasbro website that talk about who she is. So as vice president, so this is 5 minutes with two phenomenal leaders of Hasbro's Wizards of the Coast team, Jackie Jones and Jess Lanzio. As vice president, franchise, and product for Dungeons & Dragons, Jess oversees the strategic direction and product development for the D&D franchise, ensuring the team creates amazing experiences that bring people together through storytelling and adventure. So she sounds like she's pretty much the one that's in charge of like the overall strategic development of Dungeons & Dragons, and is probably above Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins. Not sure how much they have to do, how much freedom they had, but sounds like she, and this is her right there. That's her sitting on the couch. The other one is this Jackie Jones, who's at Magic the Gathering. Now, Jess Lanzio used to be at Magic the Gathering, and now she's at Dungeons & Dragons. Let's see here. The evolution of gaming, welcoming a more diverse voices. The industry has changed dramatically since I started my career. We've seen a huge shift from gaming being seen as this niche hobby to becoming a mainstream form of entertainment and connection. There's also been a wonderful evolution in who feels welcome at both the gaming table and I'm not going to talk anymore about that. So she is essentially in charge of Dungeons & Dragons. Here is another article that was a sit down with CNBC. And talks about the 50th anniversary of Dungeons & Dragons from Jess Lanzio. So that's who that is. That's who they're talking to. That's who they're interviewing about Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford leaving. Now, let's continue the article here. So the timing of their departure was also deliberate, as both waited for the newly revised core rulebooks to come out before leaving the D&D team. Was it? That's my question. Was it deliberate, or were they waiting to see what the sales were? They haven't talked about the sales very much at all with these new books. If the books had been selling like the 2014 version had sold, they'd be talking about it, but they're not really talking about it that much. So let's see. Let's continue. So Jess says they wanted to make sure that the core rulebooks were really successful, that they were setting up all of the future leads for success. That has happened, and they feel really reassured that the folks in the place will be able to carry on with the wonderful legacy that they've been given, and then bring their own stuff to the table, which they've already been doing. So the next part of this goes, who will replace them? And that's kind of where I want to go, the direction I want to go now. Now that Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford are essentially gone, who is taking over? Now, Dungeons & Dragons has not gone in a direction that, in my opinion, is the direction that it had gone in 2014. Mike Merles was the designer for the 2014 Legacy version of 5th edition and the rules in themselves. And things in that setting went very well, in my opinion, until about 2019. And then things started to kind of get stale and go downhill a bit. And then we went through COVID. Dungeons & Dragons was very popular during COVID, but the products that were being put out during that time were not great. And they didn't sell great either. Then we got the OGL crisis, scandal, however you want to call it, and we just went from there. So who is taking over? So in the immediate future, no one will directly step in to replace Crawford or Perkins. However, Let me make sure I can see this. Okay. However, Lanzio mentioned that James Wyatt and Wes Schneider. So who is James Wyatt? All right, here's James Wyatt. And James Wyatt has been involved in Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards of the Coast for a long, long time. So he's worked with Wizards of the Coast where he designed supplements and adventures for Dungeons and Dragons. He is the author of sci-fi and fantasy novels, including Forgotten Realms books and the 4th edition Dungeon Master's Guide. So James Wyatt has been around since 4th edition. And there's a picture of him at Gen Con 2007. So he's about the same age as Chris Perkins. He's been around for a while. He wrote for Dragon Magazine, and he did some TSR stuff back in the 90s before they were bought out by Wizards of the Coast. So he's been around for quite a while. In 2014, Wyatt left Dungeons & Dragons to work on the writing and creative aspects of Magic the Gathering. So he's kind of bounced back and forth between D&D and Magic the Gathering. He's come back since then, and he was the lead for Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, which was a Dungeons & Dragons product that mirrored some of the Magic the Gathering stuff. And then he's written a few other things. Co-lead on Mythic Odyssey of... Where are we at here? He is the co-lead on Mythic Odyssey of Theros. There it is right there. And that was another Magic the Gathering setting, and also Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. So he's done quite a few things. He has received some honors. So he received an Origins Award in 2003 for The City of the Spiders, which was a really good adventure for 3rd edition, and for an Eberron campaign setting, which he co-wrote with Bill Slavicek and Keith Baker. So he's been around for quite some time. He also, this is interesting, his other notable works include, he did work on Oriental Adventures, which has pretty much been banned at this point by Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. So he's done some good stuff. So that's who James Wyatt is. So let's get back to the article here. Who else did they name here? They named Wes Schneider. So who is Wes Schneider? Here is he right here. We've got a picture of him. That's our guy Wes Schneider right there. And he has been in, he's called a co-lead designer on the D&D 5th edition adventure Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel 2022, which in my opinion was kind of not the first, but one of the first horrible adventures that doomed any of the Dungeons & Dragons sales. So he started out at Paizo, and he also worked on Dragon Magazine, and he's been around for quite a while too. He's one of the architects of the Pathfinder Adventure series with James Jacobs. So so he's kind of bounced back and forth between Wizards and Pathfinder, and then he came over to Wizards of the Coast in around 2018. In 2019 to 2022, right here, he was a writer on several Unearthed Arcana playtests for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, and he was a designer and editor for Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, and Strixhaven. So he helped write Mythic Odysseys of Theros and Van Richten's Guide. But it's, to me, the big thing is, if he is a designer on Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel, that does not bode well for the game itself. Now, who else are they mentioning in here? And so they say Lanzio also mentioned that other designers, including Justice Armand, would also have progressive leadership roles. I'm not sure what they mean by that, but here is a picture of Justice Armand. There he is right there. He says, I am a proud Iranian-American writer, editor, and amateur chef thriving beneath the gloomy skies of Seattle, Washington. So he's a game designer for Wizards and game designer for Dungeons & Dragons tabletop role-playing game at Wizards of the Coast. Previously, he was a game designer at Beetle and Grimm's. So that's a thing. And let's look at his portfolio. And lo and behold, so he's worked on Quest from the Infinite Staircase, the horrible Planescape that they did. The Keys from the Golden Vault, that was terrible. Journeys through this Radiant Citadel, another terrible, terrible adventure. Darkhold Secrets in Zentarum, Curse of Strahd. He's worked with Tal'Dorei Reborn, so he's worked with Matt Mercer in the past. Not a lot of like mainstay big products, but a few. I'm not sure what Light of Zarissus is, but that I guess is another adventure. But again, I don't know why Wizards of the Coast is going in this direction where they're getting all these folks that worked on Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel to steer the direction of Dungeons & Dragons. Now, one name that is not mentioned in all of this is Jason Tondro. And Jason Tondro is another senior designer for the Dungeons & Dragons team, and he appeared in several videos for the 2024 Dungeons & Dragons where he talked about some aspects of the 2024 rollout, and he also was famously in the videos for the 50th anniversary book where he said that many of the things that Gary Gygax had created would not be included today because they wouldn't pass through their inclusivity reviews. So in addition, this guy also wrote the 2-page foreword in the 50th anniversary book, which we cannot see here. But, you know, that was a very, to me, in my opinion, that was a very insulting thing to write about Gary Gygax. And then, of course, he was the lead designer with on the Deck of Many Things. So there you have it. We have another lead for Dungeons & Dragons who is no longer going to be at Wizards of the Coast. Both Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins are gone. We have some speculations on who is going to be taking place, and there you have it. So that is what I have for everybody today. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and I will catch everybody